You can't think about PlayStation without thinking about Naughty Dog. These motherfuckers have been holding it down for Sony as long as I've been alive. Whenever a new PlayStation console comes around, you can bet money that these dudes will follow up with some dope new series that shakes up the industry. And what's interesting about Naughty Dog compared to a lot of other old ass game developers is that with each new series that they come out with, it's always been more mature than the last. You know the story. They made a stamp on people's childhoods in the 90s with Crash, went through a transition period of Jak in the early 2000s, and then went on to make Uncharted and The Last of Us, which are cinematic experiences in video game form. Not surprised to see those series adapted into a movie and HBO show respectively. All this is to say that Naughty Dog in a sense grew up with their player base. It's not too uncommon to hear someone say that they used to play Crash as a kid and then went on to play the Uncharted games during their college years or something. Everyone has their preferred era, and often when people compare their games, it's usually within their own series. Makes sense since all these trilogies look and play wildly different from each other. But what if we didn't do that? What if we just compared their whole gamography to each other? Well, you don't have to ponder that because as you can see with the title of the video, I already did that. Yeah, over the past couple of months, I replayed every game made by these guys to see which one is the best, and thankfully, most of them hold up pretty well, so it ended up being a pretty enjoyable experience. Just a little caveat though, I'm only talking about their games starting from Crash Bandicoot forward, and the reason is because no one really gives a shit about those early games, and frankly, I don't either. It shouldn't be said, but obviously this video is based on my opinions and personal biases, so if you rock with them, cool. If you don't, well, you're free to make your own list. Anyway, enough of the boring intro stuff. This is every Naughty Dog game ranked from worst to best. And let's start off hot with what I still think is their worst game. Yeah, no, it still sucks. And now that I played through this game twice, I'm actually more sure of its suckage now than I was back then. And I read through the comments of that video I made way back. I really wanted to know why people fuck with this game beyond nostalgia, but all I got were motherfuckers saying that the only reason I don't like this game is because I suck at it, which I guess is typical whenever you complain about the difficulty of a game online. But my issue with this game isn't that it's difficult. I actually prefer difficult games. My issue is with how it's difficult. The controls are terrible, the city is poorly designed, and the checkpoints? What fucking checkpoints? It's like they fired whoever was responsible for them halfway through development. Let's talk about the controls because that's the immediate thing that really turns me off about this game. So, the first Jak and Daxter was a pure open-ended platforming game, right? It was all about navigating the environment and trying to collect these eggs and power cells. And the game made it fun by giving Jak a versatile moveset that felt and looked smooth and could be applied to multiple situations. The same moveset is brought back in full for Jak 2, but it might as well have not been since this game is all about shooting and driving. And let me tell you man, the driving is dog shit. Vehicles can barely turn, the skies are overpopulated with other vehicles, which means you're going to be bumping into shit every 2 seconds. And this is made extra annoying with the vehicles in this game being made out of fucking cardboard. Seriously, 2 bumps and your ass is walking. You learn pretty quickly that you're supposed to drive to the ground most of the time, but you're still not safe there as the streets are filled to the brim with guards who will call the whole city on you after just 1 bump. I swear I've heard the chase theme of these assholes more than the default overworld theme because it's not like these guys let up quickly either. God, Haven City has got to be one of my least favorite open world settings ever. There's really nothing to do in this shithole outside of the main quest, and the sheer act of getting to these main quests is made painful with how disconnected the whole city is. Narrow ass roads and sharp turns everywhere, dead ends all over the place. God damn man, if there was ever an open world game that needed fast travel, it would definitely be this game. So what about the main gameplay loop, which is the shooting? Well, this ain't no Ratchet and Clank, I'll tell you that. There's no manual lock-on system, which means you have to pray Jak shoots at the target you want, and often, that motherfucker doesn't. You're going to be spamming this spinning shot move as it's the only way to guarantee hits on the wave of enemies coming your way. And going back to just 4 weapons is pretty whack after coming from Jak 3. It's almost like Naughty Dog knew that the shooting in this game was only okay because half the time the missions have you doing some other shit. Everything from skateboarding to racing to on-rails turret shooting to random mini games. This game throws a lot at you. It's cool that these missions barely repeat themselves, but this game does run itself kinda thin. It's not like these racing missions are as good as any racing game at the time, and it's not like every other mission type is in Smash 2. Unfortunately, this game is filled to the brim with the types of missions that I despise. Time trials and escort missions. I said it once and I'll say it again. If you want to make something unfun, add a timer to it. And these escort missions, man, having to protect these dumbass NPCs is almost always a pain, but in this game, it's especially painful due to the sparse checkpoints. Whoo boy, this is the big deal breaker for me. These checkpoints are just straight up disrespectful, and it blows my mind that people defend them. You could be over halfway through some of these missions and one death will send you all the way back to the beginning. Wouldn't be so bad if these missions were short and snappy, but we're talking up to 15 minutes of gameplay loss. That's not difficult. That's just wasting the player's time. If I mess up at a certain part, why the fuck do I have to redo parts before it? 1 step forward, 3 steps back, and people talking about, oh well, that's just how games were back then. No the fuck they weren't. Lenient checkpoints were already industry standard by this point, and even if they weren't, it still wouldn't make this good. There's a reason we made it standard, is because players like to get right back to where they messed up. As far as the non-gameplay stuff, I will say that this game still does look pretty good for a PlayStation 2 game. Animations both in-game and cutscenes are ultra smooth and expressive, and I like how there's always something going on in the background to a lot of these cutscene conversations. I'm pretty neutral on the story itself though. I don't necessarily mind the abrupt switch into having a darker story revolving around revenge, time travel, and an incoming war, but man, this game just oozes 2000s edginess. Jack can actually speak in this game, but I kind of wish he would have kept quiet, as most of his dialogue is just generic tough guy talk that I would have found cool when I was like 10. And I'm not really feeling his chemistry with Daxter in this game. They don't really feel like pals like in the first game. I don't know how much of a hot take this is, but man, Daxter is pretty damn insufferable in this game. I don't know if there was a switch in writers, but he is just not funny. If anything, he's just annoying. Jack and some other characters will be discussing some serious shit relevant to the plot, only for it to be interrupted by some unfunny gag involving Daxter. What makes it even more painful is that his role in this game is strictly comic relief, but I don't think I chuckled once. Wouldn't be surprised if mad people have already stopped watching, as I know this game is a beloved classic to many, but I'm sorry y'all, I just can't look past these issues I have. I'd much rather play the 2 games surrounding this one. The game that put Naughty Dog on the map is also one of their weakest. Yeah, I can't really say I care much for the first Crash game, at least as a game. As a historical milestone, I respect the hell out of it being one of the first 3D platformers worth a damn and giving Sony their own mascot platformer to compete with Nintendo with. I just never really reached for this one over the sequels though. This game suffers from what I like to call first game syndrome, and that's when the first game of a series is clearly worse than what comes later. A worse look, bare bone mechanics that aren't defined yet, and a story that may not be interesting yet. The last part doesn't really apply, as Crash is just a goofy platformer that barely even has a story, but the other parts are applicable in full effect. For one, this game just feels worse than the others. Crash is slower, animations are clunkier, there's this weird slipperiness after every spin, and the jump is noticeably heavier in this game, which sucks, especially as out of the 3 Crash games, this one is the one that's hyper focused on platforming. No gimmicks, just levels with near death jumps constantly. For some, this is a win, as on paper, this is just the good parts only with no gimmicks, but that's only on paper, as the good parts aren't that good yet. Yeah, I was definitely liking this game less as I was playing through it, especially when I got to the 3rd island and noticed how obnoxious the levels were getting. Again, maybe I'm too used to the quick pace of the sequels, but levels like this jungle one did not need to be that long. And the high road, man, just thinking about that level irritates me. I don't know how the fuck some of y'all are 100%ing this game. Going through these levels in reverse with this camera angle sounds like a goddamn nightmare. Anyway, all this is to say that there isn't some joy to be had. I mean, it is a Crash game after all, so the core gameplay loop of running through these levels and smashing boxes is still fun enough on its own, and believe it or not, this is one of the better looking early PlayStation 1 games. There's just not enough here for me to get too excited about. Damn, I kind of feel bad for this game because everything that made it special back in 2007 is seen as generic these days. The constant cover shooting, ultra realistic graphics, the focus on creating a cinematic experience of all these cutscenes and set pieces. There's been like a million different games since this game that have done what it's done but better. Hell, gameplay wise, there's no reason to reach for this one over the sequels, as those games just play and feel better in every way. Yeah, another case of first game syndrome, except unlike Crash 1, this isn't one of those skippable debuts, as this game lays down the foundation of Nate's relationship with Elena, which is practically the emotional through line for the entire series. Their banter and just overall chemistry has always been great, and even in this game, it's already a highlight. You can tell the writers are still trying to figure out these characters though, because some of their behaviors don't really make that much sense after playing the sequels. Like, when Nate and Elena are outnumbered by Roman's forces, Nate is the one that decides that the treasure just isn't worth this mess, and the reason that this is out of character is because the later games hammer home how much of an obsessive Nate is when it comes to treasure hunting, and the dude was up against much worse odds in those games. Or how when Sully gets shot in the beginning and is thought to be dead, Nate just kind of forgets about it for a large portion of the game. Like, the dude is clearly distraught about it when it happens, but literally 2 scenes later, he and Elena are back to lighthearted bantering. No mourning or nothing. And the reason that this is out of character is because, again, in the sequels, we're shown how close these guys are with each other. It isn't some simple camaraderie among thieves. These motherfuckers are on some family shit. Arguably the most important people in each other's lives, which makes it even more baffling that Nate would suspect a betrayal from him later on in the game. Now, obviously, these aren't big issues if you play this game by itself and don't move on to the sequels, but if you have played the sequels, going back to this is pretty jarring. I couldn't even tell you how I feel about the villains in this game because they were so damn forgettable. I forgot their names even after just looking them up. It's almost like Naughty Dog themselves weren't confident in this fake ass James Bond villain, because later on they switch him out for another asshole that's equally uninteresting. Results in a pretty shitty boss battle at the end too. But narrative beats aside, the real issue with this game is the gameplay, more specifically the pacing, which is absolutely atrocious. So after Nate and Elena escape the bad guys and head to the island where El Dorado is, the game is straight cover shooting segments back to back for what feels like forever. And the reason this is bad is because the cover shooting in this game is mediocre as hell. The cover shooting in the Uncharted games have always been pretty bare bones, but at least with the later games, they acknowledge this by having more intricate battlefields, some extra mechanics such as the grappling hook and destructible environments, and usually some crazy action set piece that ends a chapter on a paramount note. This game, it's straight cover shooting and nothing else. Fine in 2007 when the whole mechanic was new and interesting, but pretty lame and naked feeling now. There's barely any memorable set pieces in this game too. There's that Jeep turn section through the jungle, but that barely counts as it seemed like every shooting game had a turn section back then. And then there's that jet ski chapter that even people that like this game would tell you was ass. They give you a jet ski only to stop every 2 seconds to shoot down barrels. What type of bullshit? Also, was it just me or is the pistol incredibly overpowered in this game? Like, out of all the Uncharted, you can seriously power through this game with just the pistol. It just feels like the easiest gun to land headshots with, and headshots are instant kills no matter what. This isn't a negative point, it's just something I've noticed. I do like that this game doesn't have that weird sway when aiming that the later games have though. Of course, there's more to treasure hunting than shooting down bandits, and every Uncharted game switches things up with both climbing and puzzle solving. The climbing in these games look nice, but mechanically, they're pretty fucking brain dead. It's literally just leaning Drake in the direction of clearly marked ledges and pressing X. You can't even die with most of these unless you incorrectly press something. They serve as breaks in the action, so I'm not too pressed about it, especially in this game, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like it's just the game playing itself. As far as the puzzles, man, there's a lot less in this game compared to the later games. Since the whole middle part of this game is straight action, the only part where the game could fit these in are the very beginning and the near end. And as far as the few puzzles that are present, I thought they were alright. It's mostly just matching things up to whatever Nate has in his notebook, so we're not dealing with brain busters here. But at the same time, I never really felt like the solutions were so obvious that it felt patronizing. at least most of the time. Of course, this is yet another aspect of these games that would get better in the sequels. The only puzzle that really stood out to me here was that 4-statue one in the library. It's crazy how good this game still looks graphically though. Obviously it's not holding a candle to the photorealistic games of today, but if you were to tell me this game came out yesterday, I honestly wouldn't doubt it. Kinda cheating a bit playing the remastered version in the collection, but trust me when I say that even the OG version still looks phenomenal. Mad detail in these forests, some great views, and even the facial mocap is still pretty expressive. This was easily the best looking PlayStation 3 game at the time, to the point where it kind of feels like this whole game was made just to show off how powerful it was. Some accuse this game of being a glorified tech demo, and I wouldn't go that far as you can feel the passion put into the writing, but yeah, the gameplay wise, this one doesn't have much going for it, which is why it's low on this list. I will say though, I would rather play through this game 10 times over than watch that whack ass Uncharted movie ever again. This game is pretty much Sony looking at Mario Kart and saying that they want one too. And believe it or not, this game is actually better than any Mario Kart of the 90s. For one, this game actually has single player content worth a damn with an actual story mode that's more than just back-to-back races, cutscenes, boss battles, and an actual hub area to explore. Of course, most of the fun you can have with a kart racer is playing against friends, but all of this still provides a complete experience for when you can. And yeah, I definitely could not, because this game was before me and all my friends' time, so convincing motherfuckers to go back to this would be a struggle. The usual kart racing mechanics are here, power-ups you can get from boxes and sharp turns you need to make through drifting. What separates this game from Mario Kart though, is these mechanics requiring a bit more skill. These Wampa fruits that you collect throughout the race not only increase your speed but also enhance your power-ups. The drifting in this game is a real bitch to master. No matter how many times I tried, I just can't get it down consistently. You have to press either of the shoulder buttons while turning for a drift, but in order to get a speed boost, you have to press the opposite shoulder button when the turbo meter turns red. It's not too complicated when I explain it, but the game explains it in a way where you would think you have to keep tapping the buttons you're supposed to hold. If you're coming from Mario Kart, this is something that can easily confuse you since those games typically speed boost the player after just letting go of the shoulder buttons. There's also timing your boost to the meter where the timing is surprisingly pretty strict, but this isn't a knock. I actually like that there's a higher skill ceiling. Makes winning these races feel that much more satisfying, especially against these asshole bosses that have some infinite special item you have to maneuver around. Sucks that there's only 16 tracks in this game compared to the 24 that Mario Kart games usually boast. I will say though that the small amount of tracks here are fairly good. There wasn't any where I was like, oh god, this one. Compared to Mario Kart 64, I actually like that the design of many of these tracks are way more hilly. Plays perfectly into the hang time mechanic where your character gets a boost the longer they're in the air. Races on average feel pretty fast. There's a lot of opportunities for speed boosts, and the verticality of many of these tracks just make them more interesting to drive through, at least for the time. So with all of these positives, why isn't this game higher on the list? Well, like I said earlier, this game is before my time, so I just don't have any emotional attachment to it, which is usually an excuse I don't use as there's plenty of games in the 90s that are among my favorites, but when it comes to kart racers, I don't know man, I just feel like the genre is much better now. All the customization, the bubbly presentation, the intricate tracks, like if the homies are over, I can't ever see myself putting this over Mario Kart 8, but that's just me.
Just my pride.
Motherfuckers will look you dead in the eye and tell you that this game is on par with Uncharted 2 and 4, and all I gotta say to that is,
you're wrong. Here's why.
Man, the critics also ate this one up, and I can sort of see why. On the surface, this game is a continuation of all the things that made Uncharted 2 great. Stunning realistic graphics that are some of the best on the PlayStation 3, crazy action set pieces that give off the feeling of an interactive blockbuster, great voice acting and banter between the characters we know and love, and good but not great puzzles and cover shooting. This game even explores Nate's past and adds a bit more depth to not only his relationship with Sully, but also this weird ring that he's been wearing the whole time, something that I didn't notice until this game honestly. Nate is still not quite a three-dimensional character though, and even with the next game revealing everything about his past, he never really becomes one. It's never that big of a deal though, since the Uncharted stories are never that deep or dark enough for him to even go there. And Nate fulfills his role as a great two-dimensional action hero, one of the best in gaming actually, but I digress. The point is that there's a lot to like about Uncharted 3, but that's mostly because Uncharted 2 was the one that had to take the leaps forward to define everything. Stealth is a little bit more viable this time around, but every arena will force you into a straight up gunfight anyway, so it's almost not even worth doing. The game forces you into a lot of fist fights this time around, which would be a letdown for talking about the first game, but here the fist fighting is revamped to actually feel pretty good. It's still brain dead button mashing and QTEs, but the hits feel weighty and the animations are smooth. Not to mention there's some genuinely badass moments that arise from these, like when Nate is captured by some pirates and has to escape waves of these motherfuckers by beating them all down Batman style. What I also like are these cover shooting with climbing parts. These were pretty cool. It's a deviation from the usual cover shooting, and it actually combines two of the main mechanics together, which I can't believe it took them 3 games to do. There's some improvements obviously, but man, in many ways, the gameplay has severely regressed. God, the combat in this game is the most infuriating in the entire series. The grenade spam is fucking ridiculous. As soon as you get in a gunfight and duck behind cover, there's already a grenade chucked perfectly next to you. You can see these motherfuckers preparing to do this too. The tendency for enemies to do this is so damn high, and I don't know why. Actually, take it back, I do know why, and it's to get players out of cover. Naughty Dog was probably getting shit for the cover shooting in the last 2 games being too easy, so for this game they overcorrected. It's not just the grenade spam. Every single fucking enemy is designed to get you out of cover. Grenade launcher guys that can blow you out of cover, armored shotgun guys that will make a beeline straight towards you, and even unarmed pistol guys will do the same as soon as a gunfight starts. These guys have no sense of self-preservation, which is a regression with how the enemy AI behaved in Uncharted 2. In that game, motherfuckers would hide in cover first, especially when being shot at, and if they noticed you hiding in cover for too long, that's when they would start to chuck grenades and flank. It felt like a natural tug of war that gives the player a chance to form a path of attack. Here, it's just instant, and it's really annoying. I can get down with more run and gun style gameplay if that's what Naughty Dog wanted, but the problem is that the mechanics aren't built for that. You still have slow ass realistic movement, Nate still can't take any damage, the dude staggers after every explosion, and especially late game, enemies become mega bullet sponges. A section in this game I particularly despise is that sandstorm section where these motherfuckers are somehow able to see and accurately shoot you through a sandstorm while you can't see shit. Say what you want about my other grievances, but this is some undeniable bullshit. Also, is it just me, or is the shooting in this game kinda off? It's like you're clearly shooting at a guy, but they're just not reacting. Almost like you're firing blanks. I swear all of these issues are only in this game specifically because the 2 games that surround this one don't have them. I've never been one to replay these games. As far as I'm concerned, they're one and done experiences, but if you were to force me to choose one to replay, this one would definitely not be my first choice, mostly because in this game there's a lot of forced walking sections that work in the context of the story but are super boring to play through a second time. And speaking of the story, I can't help but feel like they got cold feet at the end there. Like they really wanted to hammer home that Nate's treasure hunting obsession will eventually get him or someone he loves killed, but when it came time to teach him that lesson and actually introduce some tragedy in this series, the game said, nah, we can't let go of any of the characters we have here. We love them too much. And listen, man, I love these characters too, but sometimes you gotta make sacrifices for the feels, and with this game, all the puzzle pieces were already put in place to execute. What we have here is a pretty limp dick ending with a final boss that's on the same low tier as the first Uncharted final boss. Starting to wonder why these games even bother with boss battles to begin with. This game is paced really strangely too, like the whole middle part of this game, you're just abruptly going up against pirates and the main storyline of searching for Ubar is essentially put on pause. And this isn't some brief detour, no, this whole sequence against these guys goes on for a handful of chapters, and these are some long ass chapters too. Narratively, this whole section could have been cut out and nothing would have changed, but gameplay wise, this would have been a major loss since these string of chapters contain some of the best action in the entire series. The drive-by boat fight, battling your way into this gigantic cruise and then fighting your way out as the whole ship starts sinking. This shit was crazy. A lot of these set pieces in general really challenge your suspension of disbelief. God, I might as well have made a whole fucking review with how much I have to say about this game, but I really wanted to like this game more than I do. I still mess with it, but glaring flaws prevent it from going any higher in this ranking.
Wait a minute, it gets better! Really?
Dax, get in the car!
Jack! Are you crazy? You ruined my story!
Now!
Ah! What are you waiting for? Step on it, Jack!
So just like Crash, right after the Jack trilogy, Naughty Dog decided to wrap everything up with a racing game, except unlike Crash, this one is nowhere near as popular, or highly acclaimed for that matter. The low popularity can be attributed to the Jak and Daxter series simply not being as popular as Crash, but the low ratings confused me a bit because I ended up liking this one more. This game is badass. It's pretty much the driving in Jak 3 made into its own game, but injected with even more mayhem and edginess. Look how fast I'm going, yo. You can't tell me that this shit doesn't look exhilarating. Controls like butter too. Just like CTR, what separates this game from the pack, aside from its gritty aesthetics, is the gameplay being more skilled and luck based. Instead of random weapon boxes, you always have a choice to get one of these colored ecos, where depending on the color, the player can fire at other players, defend themselves, or get a boost. Adds a bit more strategy to these races as you can actually plan out actions in advance since you know what items are always coming. This shit isn't called combat racing for nothing either. Unlike other kart racers where an item will temporarily stop another driver, here eco weapons can completely fuck up other players burnout style, and it's always awesome to witness. This means hyper aggression is encouraged, which is how I usually like to play these games anyway. You can customize your cars and shit, and just like CTR, Naughty Dog made another fully fledged adventure mode in this game that really didn't have to be this good. Like, I'm talking full cutscenes that are of the same quality as Jak's 2 and 3. This game even continues on the storylines of those games, which means this game is practically Jak 4 in all but gameplay. There's no big world-ending threat this time around though. Instead, the crew go to another city and have to win a bunch of races to win an antidote for a poison they all consumed. Yeah, small scale, but the stakes are still pretty high. It's cool to see these characters interact for one last time, but even more than that, this game goes out of its way to tie up some loose ends from the previous Jak games, which I appreciate. Kira's character in particular gets a spotlight, which was definitely needed after getting pushed to the side after the first game. Her whole deal is that she wants to race, but her father Samos won't let her because it's dangerous. For those that haven't played this game, you could probably guess where this sort of storyline goes. It's your typical girls can do it too storyline, which even for 2005 was already a little tired, but hey, it's something. They could have easily slapped on some generic arcade mode and called it a day, especially since this whole game was made as a transition for Naughty Dog. Jak 3 marked the end of the old Naughty Dog with the founders, and the first Uncharted marked the beginning of the Naughty Dog that we know today. Jak X is right between these 2 points where much of the new blood started to take over, but they still had to maintain the practices of the old guards. They do a good job because I would have thought that the exact same staff that made the other Jak games made this. Honestly, this game is pretty underrated. It's not amazing or anything, but I definitely liked it more than I thought I would. Reason it's not higher on this list is because there's simply much better games ahead.
How's biz? I'm designing new guns to help out the war effort.
You make guns now?
Yeah, I just finished this new gun. It sports a multi-port, large-bore, gyro-burst launcher with blowback breach assist, using full-jacket, eco-depleted, armor-piercing slugs, and a continuous kill zone scanner for tight groupings at a high cycle rate of fire. It's a hobby.
So after my infamous Jak 2 Sucks video, I had everyone and their third cousin telling me to check this one out. Apparently I would actually mess with this one since it addresses all the issues I had with its predecessor. And yeah, you people were right. This game is good. Like, really good. Apparently a lot of people rate this and Jak 2 pretty evenly, and I disagree with this. I think this game is much better. For one, you're not in jank-ass Haven City for most of the game. Instead, Jak 3 sees both Jak and Daxter in the Wastelands in this game, which is a space that's the complete opposite, a vast open desolate space that's sometimes extremely hilly. There's not even any vehicles that can fly high out here. Instead, you're grounded the whole time with a bunch of Mad Max style cars. And already the driving of this game is way more satisfying. No dumbass vehicles and pedestrians in your way, no constant sharp turns to make. The steering and just overall control of these vehicles is much more fluid. This is to say that there aren't any challenges. You still got bandits in their own vehicles that want a piece of you, and depending on the vehicle, some aspects such as acceleration or steering will be worse. But all this is to be expected and a much more preferable type of challenge compared to navigating the cardboard vehicles in Jak 2. So already just getting to missions is much more enjoyable. What about the missions themselves? Well, Jak 3 plays exactly like Jak 2. There's still a constant rotation of shooting, platforming, and driving missions that are time-based. Big difference is that you're not fucked in the ass by bad checkpoints when you die, and holy shit, y'all don't know how much more enjoyable this game is because of that. I must have not been the only one complaining about this because it's night and day how much more lenient the checkpoints in this game are, and this game is so much better for it. And hey, this game actually gives Ratchet & Clank a run for its money with its weapon arsenal. Not only do you have all 4 guns from the second game, but each of them have 2 more variants on top of them now. And let me tell you, man, these guns are not only damn fun to use, they're also extremely effective. Almost too effective. Some of these guns are so devastating, I felt like they were made for a higher enemy count in mind. Still don't know why they couldn't add some sort of manual lock-on system, but I guess they don't want to copy Ratchet & Clank too much. Jak in general just has way more going on with all these light eco powers. I wish the game focused more on using these and just running gun stuff in general. I'm looking back on all the footage I recorded for this game, and there does seem to be a fair amount of foot missions, but for whatever reason, it feels like there's way more driving in this game. Especially in the beginning, for whatever reason, this game opens with several driving missions back to back, which got me worried that this game would completely abandon its platforming roots. Like, I understand they're already creating Jak X, but goddamn. Like Jak 2, I'm once again pretty neutral on the story. This one doesn't feel as try-hard edgy, but for whatever reason, I don't really remember much about this game aside from the 2 big reveals towards the end of the game. And yeah, that precursor twist was gold. A little disappointed about this Vigor guy though. I see this asshole on a lot of best video game villains of all time lists, so I was kind of expecting him to be this constant scumbag that's entertaining to watch. And he is a scumbag, but the dude is barely present throughout this game.
You and your rat are an abomination. But I will rid the planet of this scourge soon enough. Pure light will rule the universe, and I will be the bright light that shines to every corner of the world and destroys all shadows.
Excuse me, Count Vulgar.
It's Vigor.
Kira gets done so dirty. Not only is she awkwardly mute for most of this game due to her voice actor leaving, she ends up getting cucked in the end by Ashleen. Who would have thought that she would end up in a worse romantic situation than Daxter, who was actually back to being a good comic relief in this game. I think the reason for this is that he's just written way less obnoxiously in this game, but also the lighter tone suiting more of his antics. Both him and Jak are actually back to feeling like pals, and that's mostly because Jak in this game isn't so revenge obsessed. They even brought back some of Daxter's death scenes. Anyway, that's all I gotta say about this one. I played it, I liked it, stop asking me about it.
Worth it?
Impressive.
Yeah, I can see why no one really gave a fuck about this game, because from a distance, this game just looks like DLC for Uncharted 4, and with how Uncharted 4 ended, I think a lot of people were content with leaving the series as is. However, there's a reason Naughty Dog released this as its own game, and that's because there's a lot of good shit here, and I'm pretty sure that this game is as long as Uncharted 1 anyway. The fact that this game has Uncharted 4's looking gameplay already has it higher than some of the other Uncharted's for me, and that's because Uncharted 4 actually has some legitimately good action and stealth that's viable, but I'll get more into that when that game comes up on the list. For this game, you do the usual Uncharted things of shooting, climbing, and puzzle solving, except you're not looking at the ass of Nathan Drake for 8 hours. Instead, you're looking at the asses of Chloe Frazier and Nadine Ross, the fun Aussie chick from the second game, and the hardcore mercenary chick from the fourth game. The game sees both of them teaming up to find the Tusk of Ganesh for their own personal reasons, and it results in a chill girls' day out where nothing whatsoever goes wrong. Wouldn't have thought to pair Chloe and Nadine together for an adventure, but in hindsight, these two paired better than damn near every character, and the reason is because Chloe's laid-back sarcasm and Nadine's uptightness lend well to the classic straight man funny man dynamic. Anyone who's seen media with this sort of dynamic knows that part of the fun of watching it is seeing two polar opposites grow close to each other after initially being hostile, and this game executes that pretty well. Maybe I'm easy to please, but I'm always intrigued when the girls here just shoot the shit and slowly reveal more about their past with each conversation. Gives us more insight into why they do what they do, which the other games didn't have time to go into. Makes them better characters overall. Sam joins the party later on and makes the banter in this game even better. By this point, the girls are legit pals, so he ends up being the butt of a lot of their jokes, and it's some entertaining banter.
We'll bring the cart over. We'll meet you halfway.
There you go. That's using the old noodle.
The what?
It's the noodle. It's a saying, as in your brain.
That is not what I pictured.
It was a compliment. For Christ's sakes.
Uncharted villains have always been pretty hit or miss, but luckily the Sasav guy in this game was pretty dope just for the fact that he has hands and he knows it. Handling both Nadine and Chloe at the same time, how strong is this guy? Nadine in the last game was able to handle both of the Drake brothers at the same time. Either the devs realized she was way too strong and nerfed her for this game, or this guy's just that much of a beast. I love how when villains like this lose their glasses, all of a sudden that calm, rational shit just goes out the window. This in Uncharted 2 has me wishing that every Uncharted game had a train level because god damn this shit was good. I also really enjoyed Chapter 4 where the game goes away from its usual linearity and allows you to explore this wide open space for tokens. Weirdly, the thing I like the most about this game is the puzzles. These are probably my favorite set of puzzles in the entire series, and that's because they're not only visually interesting, but you actually have to solve some shit beyond just matching whatever's in the notebook. Maybe I'm stupid, but man, this shadow puzzle took me a long ass time to figure out. Wasn't ever frustrated though. That eureka moment when I finally figured it out was pretty dope. And this game should have had more of those, but unfortunately when you take too long on some of these, Nadine insists on giving hints that practically tell you what the answer is, which is pretty lame. Like, motherfuckers are already gonna look up the answer on their phone anyway when they get stuck for too long. Why spoil it for the rest of us that actually want to figure this shit out on our own? As far as the combat, nothing has changed except for finally adding a silenced pistol. 5 fucking games and we finally get a ranged stealth weapon. About damn time. Makes this game hella easy compared to the other games though, since you can actually pick off guys from a distance. But it also adds a new dimension in how you can approach these battles, which I like. Such a missed opportunity to have this game be co-op. Nadine is right by your side the whole time fighting. Might as well make her a playable character. Can't be the only one that thinks that a co-op Uncharted game would be super dope. Anyway, it's cool to see this world go on without Nathan Drake, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of these short side quests starring other characters. If y'all like Uncharted and you haven't played this one, you're missing out because this game is tight. So this is where the ranking starts to get tough because deciding between this and Warped as my favorite Crash game really had me thinking. Both games are the best the series has to offer, but in the end, I think I like Warped just a little bit more. I'll get into why when that game comes up, but for now, what's up with Crash 2? Well, it's practically one of the best sequels of all time because god damn, this game improves upon everything the first game had to offer. Smoother graphics, smoother controls, less archaic level design all around. This game is still heavily focused on platforming, but instead of just reaching the end of the stage and being done with it, you now have to seek out these crystals. I say seek in quotations because more often than not, these things are in your direct path anyway. I ain't complaining though, it just means that the player can focus more on the level itself, and yeah, these levels are pretty damn fun. There's not really much else to be said, it's the usual running, jumping, and animal riding that the series came with, except way more polished. Only part of this game that flat out sucks is towards the end with those terrible jetpack levels and underwhelming final boss.
Bandicoot. Roar!
Yeah, we're already talking about it because like I said before, I like this game more than Crash 2, but only slightly. It seems like people's preference between this or Crash 2 mostly have to do with how much they like the gimmick levels, because this game has a lot of vehicle stages that don't have anything to do with the platforming. And yeah, I'm one of these people that actually fuck with these stages. Saw them as a nice break from the usual running and jumping, and even with those, I just like these levels the most out of all the Crash games. Since Crash is traveling through time in this one, it allows for more historical settings. It results in these levels being the most diverse thematically. Not only that, but none of these stages overstay their welcome. This game goes by pretty fast actually. This game is as long as the other Crash games, but it really doesn't feel like it. Probably because you can full on sprint in this game, which makes going through these stages a breeze. I haven't talked about the boss battles in these games much, and that's because the bosses in these games have just been basic shit. But the bosses in this game are actually pretty fun challenges with less waiting around for weak spots and more active movement. Yeah, when it comes to these classic Crash games, there's not really much to say. It's good old-fashioned 3D platforming from when this was still the thing. Sometimes you have to wonder where this series would have gone if Naughty Dog stuck with it, but then again, we wouldn't have gotten some of the great shit that they would create later. Speaking of which...
There we go. Now be careful facing that monster lurker at the top.
Wait! I'll stay here and protect Kira. Jack, I think you're ready to handle that monster without me.
Oh, really heroic of you.
Yeah, if Naughty Dog continued making the Crash games, we wouldn't have gotten this game, which is honestly one of the best collectathons of all time. Kinda sucks that I didn't get to this game till my adult years, but hey, better to get to it eventually than to never get to it at all. Y'all know the story for this game. After defining the PlayStation 1 with the Crash games, Naughty Dog moved on to making this new IP for the PlayStation 2. The first Jak game sees Jak and Daxter searching for some dark sage to turn Daxter back into a human. In order to do that, they need to gather these precursor orbs and power cells to get through the world, and that's pretty much the name of the game. Gathering these orbs and power cells and whatever else is on the list. Sounds boring, but this game is surprisingly addicting. The movement is great, the level design is seamless, and the game still looks great with its timeless cartoony look. But beyond all that, this game was a technical milestone at the time, being one of the first games to have an all interconnected world with no loading screens, meaning you can play this game from World 1 all the way to the final world without having to wait for shit. This is a little bit of cap, as this boat and elevator ride are really loading screens in disguise, but it's still pretty impressive that so much of this game is uninterrupted game time. The big reason why this game might be my favorite collectathon of all time is simply because collecting everything and 100%ing this game isn't such a pain in the dick. Most games have you do a shitload of backtracking and unrelated tedious bullshit in order to get everything. With this game, everything you do contributes to the collecting. Helping out NPCs, abrupt side quests, and even side minigames will always net you something. They're all in the way too, which is why this is one of the few games that I actually like 100%ing. The whole vibe of this game is just comforting. If it wasn't a game, I could easily see this being an early 2000s Nickelodeon cartoon. The humor, character interactions, and animations all have that sort of charm. This is really the only game in the trilogy where Daxter feels equally as important as Jak. Probably why they dropped his name for the title in the sequels. Since Jak is a mute in this game, Daxter does all the talking for him, which allows for his abrasive personality to shine more. Unlike the sequels, he isn't just comic relief, he actually moves the plot along. So yeah, it's good. I don't really know how to end this, so let's just keep it moving.
Maybe they gave up?
You're funny.
Long way down.
Shit, if my Jak 2 placement didn't get people mad, then this being so high will definitely get some people heated. This game brings out some strong reactions out of people, man. This game did have some big shoes to follow, but man, I've never seen a game so divisive. Some people think it's a masterpiece that follows up the first game well, while others think it's more overrated AAA dog shit that tries to be more movie than game. Both sides have valid points, but as you can see with the high placement here, I side more with the praisers. Yeah, I'm sorry y'all, I really enjoyed this game. Don't think it's a masterpiece. There's definitely some issues with the story and how this game is paced, which I'll get into, but everything else about this game is A1. Just when I thought Uncharted 4 was the best looking game on the PlayStation 4, this game comes around and topples it easily. It's absurd how detailed this game is with its visuals. Everything from the character models to the movement to the environment just feels so damn real and crisp. And this game is 60 frames? Say what you want about Naughty Dog, but damn are their games polished to perfection. Apparently this is the second most expensive game of all time in terms of development costs, and yeah, you definitely feel that shit. This game probably won't look too impressive in like 10 years being so reliant on photorealism, but then again, graphical leaps have been getting less noticeable as of late. With fancier graphics comes crazier looking combat. Combat in this game is brutal. People's limbs getting chopped off, cries of agony and pain. Like the violence in the first game was already brutal, but this is another level. Makes each gunfight feel that much more intense. Gameplay wise, there isn't too much that has changed from The Last of Us 1. The game still rotates in you dealing with the infected and other hostile survivors. Resources are still limited and the aiming still sucks, which means you can't go all guns a-blazing and have to plan out your shots. It also means that scavenging around the environment for shit is still vital. The improvements come in making all these existing mechanics smoother, but also adding some minor mechanics that both add a little bit more dimensions to how arenas are constructed and give the player more options. Lots of tall grass that you can go prone in, small spaces and walls that you can slip through, the ability to dodge hits, and even silencers that can be crafted for better stealth. The usual fungal beasts we know and don't love are still here, and they mostly operate the same except for the stalkers who actually stalk now, and these new stinky ass shamblers. If you didn't fuck with the gameplay in part 1, then this game won't change your mind as the gameplays are pretty minor, but as someone that did fuck with the gameplay there, yeah, this is just more of a good time but even better. But that's just the gameplay. The story, which is the main selling point here, now that's the thing that's pretty fucking messy, and this is where I start to side with some of the haters a bit, because the execution of the themes and characters could have been done better. This game has a lot going on here, but I'm pretty sure the two main themes of this game are one man's hero is another man's villain, and also the whole like revenge is a never-ending cycle thing. The game tries to get this across by having you take over the main antagonist Abby for the whole second half of the game, and during this time you're supposed to see their perspective on things and empathize with them so that when you're Ellie again, you wouldn't want to go through with killing her. The problem, at least for me, is that I never got to the point of empathizing with Abby. Not because I was so distraught over what they did to Joel, honestly the motherfucker had it coming, but because she doesn't really feel like a character. Her purpose in the story feels like a means to an end, a plot device first and foremost. And the reason I say this is because none of her actions make any damn sense, and there's no self-reflection or introspection there. Without going into spoilers, she's characterized in the beginning of the game as one way, right? But then she gets an arc where she abruptly turns righteous, only for that to not actually be the case at the end of that arc, and then the game wants you to take pity on her in the end? Yeah, no, I'm not buying it. And then there's the halfway switch where you switch to Abby's part right when Ellie's quest starts to get exciting. Fucks up the whole pacing. This is kind of a random example, but like, imagine at the end of Spider-Man 3, right before Spider-Man arrives on the scene to save Mary Jane from Venom and Sandman, the movie restarts to the beginning from the perspective of Eddie Brock. You would feel kind of blueballed, right? That's kind of what happens here. You lose all your items and abilities, and it's essentially starting a new game. But even worse than that, so much of the tension, especially with the other characters, is not even there, since with Ellie's part we see the fates of all these characters. Makes getting invested in their arcs pretty tough, especially from the perspective of a character that we don't give a shit about yet. This is such a weird fuck up on Naughty Dog's part, because the obvious solution would have been just to like put Abby's part first or switch perspectives after each day. It would have kept the rising action going, maintained the tension, and some of the events would have been more of a gut punch. There still would have been some issues, but I really do feel like splitting the game up like this was a mistake. I could go on, but I don't want to turn this video into a Last of Us 2 critique. There's plenty of videos out there already going more in depth on the gripes I have. Also, I don't want to end this entry on a negative note because despite the issues I have with the story, I still do mess with this game. Along with the gameplay and general look, the performances are incredible. This is some of the best voice acting I've heard in a game yet, and goddamn, Naughty Dog's animators are good at conveying emotion, yo. Sometimes it felt like I was watching a damn HBO drama rather than playing a game.
church.
You brought a hooker to church?
Why not?
Man, I remember when this game came out, it seemed like every publication was sucking this game off, which really irritated me at the time, only having an Xbox. It was only years later when I finally got my hands on a PlayStation 3, where I was finally able to experience the whole trilogy, and like many people, I really wasn't convinced of their quality until this game. Yeah, Uncharted 2 is pretty much the litmus test. If you don't mess with this game, then the whole series probably isn't for you. This is the game where Naughty Dog figured out the tone, pacing, mechanics, and pretty much everything else that makes the series worth a damn moving forward. Uncharted 2 sees Nathan Drake searching for the Chintamani Stone, an all-powerful stone that's rumored to be located in the lost city of Shambhala. He's not alone though, as some evil Russian warlord named Lazarevich is also in search of the stone. And what ensues is a crazy adventure across South Asia. This game is wild. It opens up with Nate half dead hanging from a crashed train off of a cliff, and then from here, we embark on a journey dealing with several betrayals, other near-death experiences, supernatural beasts, and whole armies being slaughtered. That last thing is what really gets me. Unlike the first game where Nate is fighting off a bunch of ragtag bandits, this game, the dude is fending off a literal fucking army single-handedly. And then the devs have the balls to still present him as this happy-go-lucky everyman. The Ludo narrative dissonance is strong with this one. Doesn't bother me as much as some people. If the gameplay is fun enough, I'm willing to look past a lot of shit. And yeah, this game's a blast. This is where the series really starts to feel like an interactive blockbuster with all these crazy action set pieces. Man, that whole train sequence is probably the best stretch of action this series has done. You start from the back of this long ass train and have to make your way to the front, all while fighting off all of Lazarevich's men and watching for other obstacles that can kill you. The reason this level is so good is, for one, the train is going through all these highly detailed environments in real time, which even on today's hardware would give some games a hard time. But not only that, gameplay wise, there's more going on here, dealing with guys on top of the train, inside the train, climbing on the side of it, all while the stakes keep escalating. A freaking helicopter tailing you, juggernauts in your way. Yeah, this shit is wild. There's a reason Naughty Dog would try to do it again in The Lost Legacy. There's not too much that's changed combat-wise from Uncharted 1. Weapon variety is still pretty low, and Nate isn't any more capable than he was in that game. The reason it feels so much better in this game though is simply how it's paced out. Instead of just cover shooting in the same environment waiting for enemies to come in waves, this game has you continuously going through different types of environments, bringing the action to the enemies. Arenas are way more interesting this time around, adding verticality with multiple routes to flank, and every firefight is capped off with some action set piece to end things on a paramount note. Of course, this game isn't all action. The game knows when to slow things down a bit. These quiet climbing sections aren't any more complex than they were in Drake's Fortune, but they're way more grandiose in scale and just way more pleasant to look at, which I know is a shallow reason for something to be better, but these games in general have always aimed to be more visually cool than mechanically deep anyway. It's the same with the puzzles too. Once again, it's just matching shit that you see in your notebook, except the puzzles are just much bigger in scale. Really, the reason why this game is so much better than the first, aside from the things that I've already mentioned, is the story just being way more engaging this time around. We're introduced to some entertaining characters in Flynn and Chloe that bounce off Nate well and actually challenge his morality. Lazarevich actually feels like a threatening villain, and unlike the antagonist in Drake's Fortune, I actually remember his name. And we get even more Nate and Elena adventures towards the latter half, which are always a good time. The writing is as witty as ever, and despite some dramatic moments here and there, it's always clear that you're not supposed to take this too seriously. The tone is always light. Really, my only gripe with this game is the final stretch in Shambhala, where the game goes a bit overboard with how bullet spongy the enemies are. Also, the final showdown with Lazarevich was pretty whatever, better than the bosses in the games that surround it since you're freely controlling Nate, but it's still just running around and shooting blue stuff. That's about all I gotta say about this one. I mean, it's just a really good action-adventure game. Easily the best of the original trilogy if you ask me. Not quite the best in the entire series though. That honor goes to...
Add it to the list.
Yeah, this is the peak of the series. was really going back and forth between this and Uncharted 2, because part of me actually thinks Uncharted 2 was the funner game. However, Thief's End is just the best overall experience. It's pretty much the perfect send-off for fans of the series. I can't see how anyone would enjoy this game without playing through the others, because the whole story and payoff at the end would only move you if you were following these characters from the beginning. More specifically, Nate and Elena, who since Drake's fortune have had a rocky relationship, all centered around their differing feelings about the adventuring life. It all comes to blows here, and how this game reconciles that is done beautifully. This is really the only Uncharted game where there's some strong themes to latch onto and an actual message getting across. You know, the dangers of obsession, the question of if holding up your family's legacy is even worth it, the importance of living a balanced life. Nate, for once in these games, actually goes through some mental strife, learns a lesson, and actually grows as a character. It's not a big growth, but it is something. We also get another look into his upbringing with his brother that explains why he would eventually become obsessed with Francis Drake and the adventuring life, giving even more context to some of the past games, which is pretty cool to see. Oh yeah, this game also introduces Nate's brother Sam, who somehow has never been mentioned until this game. Obviously it's because the devs didn't construct him until this game. The reasons they give for his absence are a bit flimsy if you think about it, but I'm not tripping too much since I actually like Sam as a character, and I think his chemistry with Drake in this game is some of the best writing in the series. Mentally, he's where Nate was a couple years ago, where he needs to find certain treasures in order to validate his own self-worth, and it leads to some great moments where Nate is essentially talking to his past self while recognizing that he hasn't completely changed and still enjoys the thrill of this life. And all this is not even getting into the antagonist of this game, Rafe, who, despite being this trust fund kid, still needs to find Avery's treasure to prove that he can earn shit on his own. It's less about the wealth and more about proving his own self-worth, similar to the Drake brothers. Yeah, there's a bit more to him compared to the past villains, which is why he's the best in the series so far. The story in general is easily the best in the series, but it has come at the cost of some of the fun. There's noticeably more walking, talking, and climbing sections than ever before, which can be a bit boring. Feels like the game really wanted to flex how it looks, which, don't get me wrong, this game is gorgeous, but man, there is just visuals and nothing else when it comes to these quiet moments. The game takes a minute just to get going. 3 fucking flashbacks that are essentially tutorials. You don't even get into a big action set piece until chapter 11, which is damn near halfway through the game. That's wild for this series. Compare that to the same time in Uncharted 3. Nate escaped from a burning building, went through an acid trip, and escaped from a sinking cruise full of pirates. I'm just saying, like, I know they wanted to tell a more mature story this time around, but it didn't have to be this fucking chill. They borrowed the pick and the sliding from Tomb Raider along with adding a grappling hook in order to make the climbing more interesting, which it does, but it's still not complex enough to warrant so much of it. Would have taken a bit more gunfights because the gunfights in this game are the best in the series by far. These are easily the most spacious and elaborate arenas to date. They're damn near mazes with how many ways you can navigate through them, and add the fact that stealth is legitimately viable in this game adds even more ways with how you can approach combat. This game and Lost Legacy are the only games where you can go in and out of stealth mid-fight, and it not only makes the fights feel more dynamic, but it makes sense since 2 guys would have just brute forced their way through a whole damn militia. But yeah, some issues with the lack of action aside, I still mess with this game heavy. It's not a game I ever go back to due to all the unskippable walking segments, but it's still second place on this list for a reason.
Be careful crossing that thing.
I will.
Teamwork.
Could it be anything else? I really wanted to be a contrarian and put something else in this spot, but after replaying this game for this video, I just couldn't do it, man. This game's a masterpiece, one of the most well executed stories in a video game yet. Like, the writers were on one when they created this. There was so much care and patience put into Joel and Ellie's characterization and development that by the end of the game, you almost don't want to leave them. That ending will probably cause discourse forever. We're 10 years removed and motherfuckers are still debating it. But going back to the writing, it's not just Ellie and Joel that are fully realized, but pretty much every named character you meet across their journey. All of them have differing viewpoints and wildly different set of morals, but you get exactly where they're coming from in the short amount of time that you're with them. Just like The Walking Dead, the zombies are just a backdrop. It's more about how everyone deals with a crumbling world, except unlike The Walking Dead, this story is wrapped up in a concise package. Even with the slow walking and talking moments in gameplay, it never really felt like the game was wasting my time. This game is 15 hours long, but it felt longer in a good way. A lot of shit was packed in here. Much of the praise gets levied at the story, and rightfully so, but it's not like the gameplay is slouching. Yeah, it was a cover shooter in an era where these were a dime a dozen, but the gun battles are more engaging than most due to the lack of ammo, imprecise aiming, and hyper flanking nature of the enemies. You really got to think out your shots and not be too stationary, which not only adds a necessary layer of strategy, but reinforces the desperation of trying to survive these conflicts. This same intensity is also with the zombie sections, where stealth is even more valuable. Fast running, sound attracted zombies were already played out in 2013, but The Last of Us is pretty unique in that their zombies are caused by a fungal infection. Also clickers, whose noise is recognized by a lot of people that haven't even played this game. All of what I'm saying here may sound pretty standard, but that's because I'm not trying to spoil anything specific. Also, I really don't have anything unique to say about this game that a million different reviewers and video essayists haven't already said. Incredibly well acted, one of the best looking games of its era, one of the best stories, engaging from front to back, the gameplay is super tight, and we're already seeing the influence of this game into other games. All reasons why I think it's not only Naughty Dog's magnus opus, but also one of the best games of all time.
So, is everything you were hoping for?
It's got its ups and downs, but you can't deny the view, though.
So yeah, that's the video. If you like what you saw, make sure to do the usual stuff so it gets boosted in the algorithm. I got plenty of other videos on the channel covering a variety of different games, so if you like that sort of stuff, go check it out. It really helps me out and you'll be entertained. I'm gonna go take a nap because this video took a lot out of me. Next time I come back, I'm coming back with the usual stuff, so stay tuned.